Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of our local government and going back to school lesson. So I'm Ms. Green and that's Ms. Howard. You heard from her in part 1 of this lesson about identifying costs and benefits of local policy decisions. We're both Albert Hill history and social science teachers, so go Tigers. Before we get into the meat of our lesson, let's check in together. Are you feeling okay? Do you need to drink some water or eat something before you're ready to start learning? How's your learning environment? Do you need to go somewhere quieter? Grab some headphones? What about your mental health? Are you doing okay? Are you mentally prepared to put your thinking cap on, or would tomorrow be better? If you're having a tough time right now, just remember, you are awesome and we love you. Let's take a deep breath. So breathe in, hold it, let it out. Okay, let's begin. So in this video, we will continue our goal of identifying and explaining the costs and benefits of a given policy solution using cost-benefit analysis. I know you discussed cost-benefit analysis with Ms. Howard yesterday, and you did it in a previous lesson with the both of us, but we're going to ramp things up a notch this time, so just you wait. So for this lesson, you're going to need something to write with, something to write on, and your brain power. So we're going to flex those intellectual muscles today. So here's our agenda for this lesson. So first I'm going to guide you through some cost-benefit analysis with some guided practice. Then I'm going to explain your mission, and then we're going to close out for the day. Simple. So you ready? Okay, so let's practice. So our guided practice today is going to focus on our future return to school. So what are some options that we have? And what's the very best option or the very best way to go about it? Okay, you ready to start? Okay, so to do this, Ms. Howard asked you to come prepared by first reading this article. Did you complete your mission? If not, go ahead and pause this video and read this article before continuing with the lesson. You can search for it in Google by typing in the title, How School Will Change When Kids Return to Classrooms. Otherwise, let's go. Okay. So you were supposed to read the article and then pick what you thought were the 3 best options for what school should be like once we're able to return to learning. So here were some of the choices that were laid out in the article. So teachers rotate classes while students stay in one classroom all day. That's one option. A staggered start, meaning that when the school year starts, only the students who've tested negative for COVID-19 will be able to return. Rotating schedules of in-person and online learning environments. So this is what's known as a blended learning environment. So sometimes you'd be in school, sometimes you'd be at home, but you'd always be learning. Waiting to resume school entirely until January. Replacing teachers with online education software. And then students in classrooms taught by teachers on a video screen. So those were some policy ideas suggested in the article. So you were supposed to pick what you thought were the best 3. I've gone ahead and chosen 3 that I think are interesting. I'm not sure if they're the best yet, but I just thought they were interesting choices. So the first one that I'm choosing is teachers rotate classes while students stay in one room, waiting to resume school entirely until January, and replacing teachers with online education software. I chose them because they all seem very different from one another. All right, so those were the choices that I picked. Those were my options. You probably chose different ones, and that's totally okay. Regardless, let's connect this now to what you learned with Ms. Howard yesterday about the school board. So let's make a recommendation to them about how they should reopen schools. So in your mission today, you're going to draft an email to them explaining to them what you believe is the best option to reopen schools. But to do that, we first need to figure out which option is the best. So not everyone's going to agree, though. It's subjective. So to make sure that we're making the best decision, we're going to think like an economist today and perform a cost-benefit comparison. We could use our handy-dandy cost-benefit T-chart, but then we'd have to do 3 separate T-charts and go through the costs and benefits of everyone, and then try to figure out which one has the highest benefit-to-cost ratio. Cost-benefit charts, they're really best used when we're only dealing with a single question, like should I go to college or should I become a vegetarian? There's actually an easier, better way to do a cost-benefit comparison when we're working with multiple alternatives or choices, as we are here. So we are going to use a new tool called a PACE-O decision-making model. And it looks like this. So I know it looks really complicated, but don't worry, we're going to walk through it together. Right? So PACE-O stands for 1, state the problem, 2, list the alternatives. 3, identify the criteria. 4, evaluate and total the alternatives. And 5, make a decision and recognize the opportunity cost. Okay, so that's the PACEDO. Right? I'm really excited about using this model. I learned it recently from a leading expert on economics education, Dr. Cheryl Ayers, and I just knew that we all needed this under our tool belt as another way to be smart decision makers. So let's give a little virtual round of applause to Dr. Ayers. Say thank you. Okay, so what I want you to do now is go ahead and make your own PACEDO chart just like this one. Or if you have access to a printer, I've included a copy of one in your mission for today, so you can print that and use it. So pause the video and either grab a copy of the chart or make your own in 3, 2, 1. Okay, you're good. You got your criteria at the top and your alternatives at the bottom and then the totals on the right side. Okay, so let's start with step 1, which was to state the problem. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve here? What do you guys think? Right, so we're trying to decide how should we reopen schools? So write that down above your chart. Pause the video if you need more time to write. But we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, so number 2, in order to answer this question, we need to know what our alternatives or choices are. I'm going to use the 3 alternatives that I chose previously, but you should write down the ones that you chose after you read the article from US News and World Report. So the options that I chose were rotating teachers, waiting until January, or software instead of teachers. So those are my alternatives. Again, yours might look different and that's okay. Okay, great. So we know what our choices are. Again, it's totally okay if you pick different ones. But if you need more time to write the alternatives in the chart, go ahead and pause the video. Otherwise, let's go to step 3. Okay, so now that we know what our alternatives are, we need to figure out how we're going to compare them and determine which one is the best. So we need to decide what's most important to us about reopening schools. So for that, we need to develop some criteria. These are the things that we're going to use to judge which option is best. So I've come up with examples of criteria for you, but you might find other things important, and that's okay. So you're welcome to use my criteria if you'd like, but feel free to use your own. So let's check out the ones that I've picked. So for me, I want my students to be able to get back into a routine of learning as quickly as possible after the summer. So efficiency is really important to me. I also want to be able to socialize with people outside of my home. I want to actually see my students and my fellow teachers ASAP. So socialization is another important criterion for me. Oh, just a little hint, criterion is the singular for criteria. But anyway, enough of grammar. So 3, I want as much as I want those other things, I also want to be safe. It seems pretty unclear right now that we'll have the testing and the contact tracing capabilities to fully reopen our state or even our country. And we definitely won't have a vaccine right away. And there may even be other safety concerns to consider as well. So that's definitely something that I want, that's important to me. And then finally, I want the best possible learning environment for my students so they can learn and perform to their highest potential. So those are just some of the things that are important to me when I think about how schools should reopen and when. So make sure you have your criteria filled in. Pause the video if you need some more time. Otherwise, we're going to jump to step 4. Good? Okay. Okay, so now we can actually go through each alternative and evaluate them based on our criteria. To do this, we're going to give our alternatives a score for each criterion. So here's our scoring system. So we're giving a score between 1 and 3, 1 being the alternative meets the criterion very well, 2 being the alternative meets the criterion satisfactorily, so like it meets it, but I don't know. And then 1, alternative meets the criterion unsatisfactorily, so it really doesn't do a good job of meeting that criterion. Okay, so I want you to follow along as I evaluate option 1, right, which is rotating teachers. I'm going to explain my thought process to you so then you can evaluate the alternatives on your own afterwards. Remember, you might feel differently than I do, but that's okay. All right, so let's think about efficiency. Will having teachers rotate classrooms while students stay in one all day get us back to a learning routine as quickly as possible? Possibly. It's a little hard to say, but I could see a situation in which we're able to maintain social distancing in conjunction with wearing personal protective gear like masks and gloves, and maybe having only half the students in the building at a time, where maybe this does get us back into a classroom pretty quickly. So I'm going to give this a 2. Okay, so what about socialization? Well, this would definitely give me the opportunity to be with my students and my coworkers, even if we had to be 6 feet apart from one another. So I'm going to give this a 3. Okay, so let's consider health and safety. I actually have a lot of concerns about this. I'm really not sure that our city, state, or country are going to be ready for this when September comes around. I'm not an expert by any means, but in keeping up with the news and paying attention to what scientists, doctors, and public health officials have to say about it, it just seems really uncertain. It could potentially cause another spike in COVID-19 cases. Also, I'm thinking about how this would work logistically, and it seems like there might be a good amount of time in which classes of students would be left totally unattended as teachers are rotating. My brain just always goes to the worst case scenarios in those situations. So I think I'm just going to give this one a 1. So, all right, you might disagree with me, and that's totally fine. All right, and then the last thing to think about is what kind of learning environment is this going to create? I think this would be a pretty positive learning environment. Students would be back at school under the direction and supervision of their teachers, whom, no offense to you parents who might be watching, because you've been doing your best to teach while we're away, but we're actually, trained in the best ways for students to learn. And it's just not the same when you don't have a teacher there to walk you through things, make things hands-on, write things down for you, re-explain things in a different way if you don't get it the first time, so on and so on. So I'm going to give this a 3. Okay, so now that I've evaluated all of the criteria, evaluated the alternative based on all of my criteria, I need to total it so I know its overall score. So let's add up these numbers. All right, so 2 plus 3 is 5, 5 plus 1 is 6, 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay, so now that I want to give you an opportunity to evaluate the rest of your alternatives and total their scores. So again, you might be evaluating them differently. You might have different criteria that you're using to evaluate them. You might even have different alternatives. That's all totally fine. So go ahead and fill in the rest of your chart. Pause the video in 3, 2. Okay, so how did you guys evaluate the rest of your criteria? Let me show you what I did. So I ended up with waiting until January having a total of 6 and software instead of teachers having a total of 8. So again, yours might be different, and that's totally okay. But now we need to actually make our decision, and mine might be different than yours, and that's fine. So your decision is going to be the alternative with the highest total score. So for me, that was rotating teachers because it had a score of 9, right? But remember, every decision has a cost. What's that called? Right, that's going to be our opportunity cost. That's the value of our second best alternative. So what's our opportunity, or what's my opportunity cost in making this decision? Right, it's replacing teachers with online learning software since that had the second highest score. So what should we do now that we've decided how we think schools should reopen? What do you guys think? I mean, should we just stop here and say, yeah, I know what's best, but I'm just going to keep it to myself? No, right? We should go talk to the people in charge who can actually make a difference. So let's write an email to our school board representatives and persuade them that this is the best option. Okay, so let's talk about our mission now. So let's go back a second before we jump into the details. How can we apply this PACE-O decision-making model to our own lives? I mean, for me, I think this answer is pretty obvious. We can use the PACE-O decision-making model whenever we're facing a tough decision with multiple options. So for some of you, that may have arisen when you were trying to decide what high school to go to, or what electives you should take, or even where you should take someone on a first date, right? So now that we know that every decision has a cost and we have the tools to weigh those costs and the benefits, we can use this kind of economic thinking all the time to make seemingly difficult decisions just a little bit easier. Okay, so back to our mission. So we're going to identify which school board member represents you. So in the mission document, there's a link for you to figure it out. It's super easy, very self-explanatory. After you do that, you're actually going to write them an email explaining your recommendation for reopening schools. So be sure to explain why that's the best choice and refer back to your PACE-O model as needed. And so if you're feeling a little daunted by this, it seems a little daunting, that's okay. We've included a template in the mission document that you can follow and just insert all of your information there, and it will guide you through writing an email. Okay, so this is not too challenging, but it's really impactful, right? You're actually going to be talking to someone who has the ability to implement some of these alternatives that we're thinking about. Okay. We also wanted to remind you to share your missions with us and to follow us on social media. So you can follow us on Twitter. You can send us an email with your responses and your missions. And if you do, we're going to give you a shout out in our upcoming videos. So shout outs this week go to Zoe B and Janisha W. So nice work, ladies. Great job. So on Twitter, you can follow us at RPS Civics at Home. And you can send us an email to cgreen@rvaschools.net. Okay, so we know that we're confronted with decisions all the time, right? But now you've got multiple ways to assess the costs and benefits by thinking like an economist. So go forth and make decisions. Thanks for watching and participating. Until next time. Bye.